Welcome back to a brand new video, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 common beginner photography mistakes you should avoid doing if you want to get better at taking photos. I'm in the Lake District. Beautiful. Let's kick things off with point number 1. That's about horizon lines, and I see far too many new photographers not thinking about it. Welcome to the Lake District, which is a rarity on this channel. That doesn't happen often. Normally we're in the streets of London, but I've taken a little trip out for a few days up north, and I was having a little think, what kind of video could I film? And I thought, let's throw it right back to the basics. Let's keep things simple, because landscapes like this are stunning. They look beautiful. The Lake District is beautiful. I don't need to complicate the type of photos I'm going to take. So I'm going to keep things simple, and that got me thinking, what simple tips could I share with you guys that I'm going to be implementing throughout my 3-4 day trip that I'm away here? And tip number 1 is horizon lines. Keep them straight. Don't play around with earth. It's flat. Well, it should be flat in the photo. Here's a quick example. I'm going to show you what not to do. You see an amazing landscape, you think, wow, I want to take a photo of that. Of course you do. You hold your camera up, boom, it's wonky. Look at that photo on screen. No one wants to look at that image. Is there a bug like on my lens? Get up. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like if you just put at least 3 or 4 seconds of thought into your photo. Keep your horizon lines straight, same kind of composition, f8, 125 shutter speed, ISO 100, boom. Now that is an image with a straight horizon line. It's a simple mistake to make, but it's a very simple mistake to fix. So just avoid wonky lines, or wonky lines in places where they should be straight. Like the earth is flat in photos, not in real life, but in photos the horizon line should be flat. So keep it that way, I reckon, is the way to go about that. With all that being said, it's easy for me to say keep your horizon line straight, but how do you actually do it? If you see on screen here, I've got my grid display, and that way it's super simple because the grid and the lines on screen can tell me what is and isn't straight. And this image right here, boom, we're shooting some bangers here. Yeah, so basically all these shots you're going to see, the horizon is nice and straight. All right, back on the hill from which I started this video. I think 𝘭𝘪𝘯𝘬𝘴 is over there, I think. I kind of don't really know where I am, but we're just winging this. Second tip in this video, which is a common mistake I see a lot of beginner photographers doing, is not exposing and protecting their highlights. And you might have heard people say this a million times. Whew, sorry, I'm out of breath. Hang on, 1 minute. When you first start taking photos and you're setting up the settings on your camera, you want to make everything nice and clear and easy to look at. You want everything to be bright, basically. However, making sure, and it's just really started raining, making sure everything's bright and everything looks clear is not necessarily the correct way to expose your photo. To really nail this, we need to shoot in RAW. So if you've got a digital camera and you're shooting in JPEG, switch that over and change to shooting in RAW. When we edit the photo after in Lightroom or whatever software you want to use, we can bring out the shadows. So enough jibber jabber, let's give you an example. This landscape, it's beautiful. Now if we expose an image to make sure everything's bright and clear, like a typical beginner might do, we might typically take a photo that looks something like that. And you might be able to tell that's a very clear, it's a very bright image, except for the highlights, the brightest part of the photo. The clouds have no detail in them. They're too bright, they're overexposed. Now I'm going to take a photo where the clouds and the sky and the highlights are protected and we can see some detail in them. However, by doing that, everything else might look a little bit too dark, but that's fine because we're shooting in RAW and we can bring out the shadows in post afterwards. So let me give you an example of how to properly expose an image, which might look something like this. I like that a lot. That's a nice landscape. Now you might be looking at this photo, which is raw and unedited, and be thinking, Mike, that's too dark. I preferred the first image. And I'm here to tell you that you're wrong, because once we've edited the image and we've played around with it in Lightroom, the final product will look something like this. So this is a properly exposed image where we originally exposed for the highlights, we protected the detail, the clouds look good, but then so does everything else, so does the landscape in front of us. Now compare that to the first image I took where everything was too bright. I think you get the point. Exposing for the highlights, it's important. We shoot in RAW so we can bring out the detail and shadows. And I see a lot of new photographers, beginner photographers, just taking very bright photos. You don't need to do that. With the power of editing and the power of digital cameras, we can expose for the bright parts of the photo, like the highlights, the clouds, the sunshine, except for, actually, you can't expose for the sun. It's way too bright. But you get my point. You can expose for the details in the sky, and then everything else might look a little bit dark, but we can bring them out in post and lift the shadows. And it's not raining as much anymore, which is quite good. Before we move on to the next common mistake that you should avoid doing, I want to thank the sponsors of this video, Adobe Stock. Adobe Stock allows you to earn royalties from your photography, so you can take some tips, you can take some ideas from this video, apply it to your photography, and then put that photography to good use, get it licensed on Adobe Stock and earn royalties from it. I'll tell you more about Adobe Stock later on in this video. Oh, that's wet. Change of plan. Let's just put this down. Okay, problem solved. This looks okay. Yeah, this will do the job. Number 3 common photography mistake that I see a lot of beginners making is not finding a specific composition and literally just pointing and shooting. But let's try and be a bit more intentional with our photography and find some alternative compositions that's just gonna add that little 10%, 20% to the final photo. And it also gives you a collection of photos at the end instead of turning up to a location thinking, this looks great, bam, snapping a photo, have a little walk around, look for different compositions, look for a couple different frames, and I'm sure you'll be more happy with the collection of photos that you get with a variety of different compositions rather than just pointing and shooting. As an example, so you can see what I'm talking about, I'm sat here looking at 𝘠𝘧𝘧𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘢𝘵 Lake. We've got the beach here, we've got some trees, we've got some leaves, we've got some forests in the background, hills in the background. It's a great little landscape spot. I'm going to put the GoPro on my chest so you can see point of view from me. I'm going to take a few different photos with a few different compositions. And if you do like what you see, then steal some of these ideas and implement it into your photos. Let's do it. So the first shot I want to get here is using these rocks in the foreground, and this might be called something like layering. I don't know the specifics, but this is where we've got something in the foreground and then obviously the lake in the middle of the photo, and then the background being the forest and the mountains. Like we discussed earlier, making sure my horizon line's straight, I'm exposing for the highlights, and I've got the rocks in the foreground, the lake in the middle, we're shooting it around 35mm, boom. That's a nice image. Very simple, we've captured the foreground, the details around us, but also taking a photo of the lake, which was the purpose of the image. So let's see what else we can get. For this second image, I've walked a little bit further into the forest and we're looking out at the lake again. The lake is our subject, obviously, and I'm going to use the environment around me to create a frame. So I like to call it external framing. Some people call it a frame within a frame. It's basically the idea of having stuff all around the image that kind of frame the main subject. This might not necessarily be my favorite image of the day, but like I said, it's all about finding different perspectives and different compositions. So we've got the trees in the foreground here, we've got the beach and the rocks in front of me. They act as a nice frame and they all kind of compose the lake in the middle. So once again, we're making sure our horizon line's straight, we're exposing for the highlights, and then we're going to take something, oh, we've got a little family of ducks that are just swimming into frame. That's kind of nice. Cool, something like that. Was with these leaves and the beach here, this kind of acted as a frame to nicely compose the lake in front of us. Let's try and look for one more image. So this next composition, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's the rule of thirds. It's pretty much a go-to for any type of photography. Because the rule of thirds composition is super simple, you can incorporate it with other styles, like layering, like we used earlier with the rocks in front of us. We're going to do the same sort of thing here. I'm going to use the rock in front of me and frame that in the bottom third. Then we've got the horizon line, which we are obviously going to keep straight. That's in the middle of the frame, and then obviously the negative space and the sky in the top third. So right here we're using layering to our advantage as well as the rule of thirds for a nice portrait image. I'll show you the photos on screen along with a rule of thirds grid as well, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So right there's a couple of different examples of using some different composition styles to our advantage to try and improve this scene in front of us. Although 𝘠𝘧𝘧𝘪𝘭𝘪𝘢 Lake looks fantastic, so it's not difficult to take good photos of it, but you know, it's just about adding those 10%, 20% to our photos. And one final photo here because this just looks great. Boom. Okay, cool. On to the next tip. The fourth common mistake you need to avoid doing is missing focus. I see a lot of beginner photographers taking photos, but the thing that's in focus in the photo shouldn't be in focus. It should be something else, or they've just missed their focus entirely. Now, the reason I'm recording this on my phone is because we just trekked through a mini jungle and I wasn't expecting to bring all my camera gear down here, so. Air Forces are not the shoes to be wearing. Ah! So the audio on my phone will have to do for now. We're going to use this unbelievable landscape as my example here. So when I'm taking a landscape photo like this, I want the reflections, I want the trees, I want the mountains, and I want the lake. We want everything in focus is what I'm trying to say. We don't want to miss anything. I don't want to end up focusing on the foreground and then everything else is blurry. It's going to ruin the image. But this comes down to the settings we use on our camera. So you want to make sure your f-stop, your aperture, is at around 5.6, 7.1, 8, 11, 16, those high numbers for an aperture. That way the entire field the view is going to be in focus. If you use an aperture like a 2.8 or 1.4 or 1.8, really shallow depth of field numbers, you're going to get one thing in focus and then everything else is going to be blurry. So it's just something to think about. If you see an amazing landscape like this and you want to make sure you capture the entire thing, you definitely want to be using higher aperture numbers. And that's just something that beginners maybe don't think about. And hopefully, if you're watching this video, next time you go in to take a photo of something where you want everything to be in focus, then definitely be using a higher aperture. So now we've correctly adjusted our aperture number and we've got the correct settings depending on what we want in focus. If we want just one thing in focus, then you have a low aperture number maybe to get that nice shallow depth of field. If you want everything in focus, then you have a high aperture number. So I'm out of breath, but just look at this landscape, unbelievable. I wonder how old this Desperado. Oh, it's actually got something in it. Oh, that's probably shouldn't have picked that up. Anyway, one more thing you can do, another little tip that you can make sure your photos are in focus and they are sharp, is to have a high shutter speed. So I would recommend anything higher than 1/200th of a second is going to make sure you eliminate handheld camera shake. If your camera has any form of stabilization in it, then you can actually go lower than 200th of a second. I can take handheld photos at like 50th of a second and I still don't have any camera shake, but I wouldn't recommend it anything lower than 1/10 of a second. You're going to get camera shake and your photo is going to be blurry. Whew, I'm out of breath. All this hiking and climbing and vlogging, I'm out of breath. And we are back in my flat after an amazing 3 days up in the Lake District. A strong reminder that there is some beautiful locations in the UK other than just London street photography, so hopefully you'll see more landscape stuff on this channel. But the fifth and final point I want to make in this video, the most simple mistake to fix, the most simple mistake to avoid doing if you're a beginner photographer, is over editing your photos. This one is probably targeted at everyone that's just started a photography Instagram account. Just because you can add 100% clarity to your photos doesn't mean that you should. Just because you can add 85, on the slider of saturation, you probably shouldn't do that. My biggest tip with editing, photo editing in general, across the board, whether it's professional, street photography, portrait, landscape, photos you've seen in this video, keep it subtle. If you want an aesthetically pleasing photo, most of the time, don't go over the top. Now, if you're trying to be creative, you're trying to achieve a certain look, then yeah, go ahead, do what you want. I'm not here to set strict rules and tell you to be boring with your photography. I see a lot of beginner photographers taking quite nice images and then they add 50% texture, 100% clarity. They fade the blacks so the blacks don't exist. And I just think you don't need to do it. Chill out on the editing. My biggest tip here, and the most simple tip out of everything I've mentioned in this video, no complicated camera settings, no complicated compositions, just keep your editing subtle, and trust me, it will be that much more effective. So now I've gone over 5 common mistakes that you should avoid doing with your photography, and you can just implement a couple of these tips and start taking some decent images. I'm sure you're already half decent if you're watching this video. You're the type of person that wants to improve as a photographer. But I want to let you know about Adobe Stock and how you can earn royalties from your photos. So now you've started avoiding common beginner photography mistakes, your photos are starting to look pretty decent. Now let's put these photos to good use. With Adobe Stock, if your photos get approved on there, other designers, creators, photographers can download and license your content and you can earn royalties from it. This works so well with landscape photos like I've shown you in this video, for example. There are no modern buildings, there are no model release forms we need to get, so there should be no copyright issues. Places like national parks and the Lake District is a great place to shoot landscape photos that can get licensed onto Adobe Stock so other creatives and designers can license your photos, like I just said. Getting your photos licensed and uploaded onto Adobe Stock gives you a purpose and a reason to go and practice photography. Go and take photos, avoiding some of the mistakes I've mentioned in this video. Implement some of those composition ideas. Start playing around with different camera settings, making sure your photos are as tack sharp as possible. Put these photos to good use with Adobe Stock and earn royalties from it. Make sure you click the link in the description to get started with Adobe Stock. It's super simple. You can even upload your photos from Lightroom directly onto Adobe Stock. So why would you not want to do this? Once again, click the link in the description. Big thanks to Adobe Stock for sponsoring this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the landscape stuff, a little bit different on this channel. Normally we're in the streets of London, but this time we were in the mountains of the Lake District and it was beautiful. I thoroughly enjoyed making this video and I hope you enjoyed watching it. So please do check out Adobe Stock, a link in the description, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out. Oh, just before I go, we're on the road to 100K subscribers. If you're not subscribed and this is like the first time you've seen my face, please click that big red button. I promise I won't disappoint. I upload the best photography videos on YouTube. That might be a little bit biased, but who doesn't like a little bit of confidence? Cool, thank you.